So I think we're live for the first in the Old Mutual Future of HR Masterclass series. So welcome to this first in the part. Obviously, we're looking at unpacking the ultimate toolkit, how to turn challenges into opportunities for employees post-COVID. I'm joined by our panelists I'm going to introduce you to just now. But quickly, I'm in Cape Town. It's sunny. It was cold yesterday, almost wintry. And we'd love to know whereabouts you're calling in from. We hope you're doing well. Urvashi is joined with us from Old Mutual, so we're very grateful to Old Mutual to partner us on this masterclass. We have Professor Stoffel calling from PE and Carol-Lynn from Pretoria, so we're represented from all over the country. And you know, let's just kick it off. I see we've got over 100 participants already joined, so thanks so much. So my name is Ralf Fletcher. I'm the host. I'm the CEO of Topco Media, and we're facilitating this masterclass. Really just a quick agenda, bit of an intro to Topco, the future of HR while we're doing this. Sort of looking at employee-centric companies. I think that's really what we're trying to look at, is how companies are helping their employees. And really, we're very grateful to give you these two independent contributors who are going to start unpacking some of the things that we need to know and how we can easily implement them. We'll be doing some polls, so keep looking out for the polls. And obviously, you get a chance to ask all these participants questions. So keep those questions in the Q&As. I know Stoffel the Prof is looking for them, so keep them coming. We're going to make this a little bit fun. So, Topco's purpose is obviously to create a trusted network of top companies, startups, policymakers, academia in Africa, and we're very grateful for the academia that's part here today, and for the top companies. Old Mutual, an award-winning organization, through the many things that they do within South Africa. And really it's about bringing those people together in a trusted network to help you. So these are some of the programs that Topco offers: Top Women, Top 500. You'll see that there's a lot of tops there. But also Africa Tech Week, Top Empowerment, and Vision 2030. So really trying to look at strategic imperatives of businesses in South Africa and Africa. So the future of HR, our purpose is to be the trusted network of employee-centric organizations in Africa. And so we do that through our awards programs. It's going to be happening on the 26th of November. So look out, make sure you enter. We have some amazing organizations that are putting this forward. The future of HR for the last 3 years has been voted one of the top 20 HR tech events globally to attend. So I encourage you to get involved. I think, what we're seeing, and we saw this probably at the beginning of the year already, is there's a change, and there's a changing demands of the workplace from an employee's perspective. And so it's not about the paycheck. It's really around, is the organization's purpose linked, as their purpose linked to the organizations? It's not so much about satisfaction, but about their development, not the boss, but a coach, not an annual review, but obviously an ongoing conversation, and not focusing on our weaknesses, but our strengths. And more than that, this is not a job. This is about their life. So it's really understanding that and how we as organizations can assist our people. I think we in early September this year, we did a virtual summit. We had over 850 people attend. We had sort of 50 speakers within South Africa and around the world. And we had 10 key outcomes that really came out of the future of HR. And, I go to point one, which is the future of work is very much human. And I think that, a lot of what we have been doing is assuming that people, when they get to work, when they come to work, when they return to work, are in a state that they were when they left work pre-COVID. And the reality is that that's just not true. COVID has had a massive impact on both individuals and organizations. And so our aim, the overview really, is to try and help and facilitate organizations and how they can help their employees return to work in a healthy condition post-pandemic. And we've got some great learnings. We've got some, cures for some of these challenges, and really unpacking all of this is how do we stop the problem persisting, and how do we, create an environment that the organization and the employees can thrive, and ultimately their customers. So we'll be going through these points in great detail. We've got numerous slides, academic papers to go through, very intriguing. So let me just quickly kick off by, introducing our speakers. Future of HR Masterclass, Urvashi Ramjee, who's the head of claims at Old Mutual. We're very, very grateful. I think that, diagnostically, what we're seeing Old Mutual is they're getting information already that's sort of making them aware that there is a problem and that we need to dive in. So we're very grateful for them to initiate this masterclass. Next up is Professor Stoffel Grobler. It's Chris Stoffel, if you know him well, Stoffel if you're a friend though, and Prof if you're trying to be professional. So we're very grateful to the Prof. Obviously at the University of Pretoria, Associate Professor at the Walter Sisulu University. And finally, to make up the panel, we're really grateful for Carol-Lynn. Carol's a occupational therapist, and I think that she's the hard face. She's dealing with people with these issues, and she's part of a program where she's got insights on how we can have, actionable insights that we can take away to the team, to the environment of work. So let me go through. Okay, so we will be doing a Q&A. I suppose the only question is really for you is to keep it positive. We're very grateful for each of these participants' time and energy. So keep those questions positive. There's a Q&A at the bottom, so put them through there. And hopefully we see you all at the Future of HR Virtual Awards. Great. So I think from here now, it's over to Urvashi Ramjee. And I suppose, Urvashi, my first question really is, hold a second here. Oh dear, so someone's joined. So, yeah, there we go. Someone was impersonating you, Urvashi. So, I mean, I know that you've got a presentation and you're very well prepared, but I mean, from your perspective, Old Mutual's perspective, you've obviously invested in this masterclass. Why is that? And why did you feel the need to bring in these two independent speakers?
Yeah. So Ralph, I think what we're seeing at Old Mutual, particularly in my role, is the end of the sort of health or employee wellness type journey. So we're seeing employees who are quite seriously ill, who've been off work for long periods of time. And I think we've realized a very long time ago that the solution, I mean, we try as much as possible to intervene, to assist these employees, but the key is really upfront, how we support and manage and measures that we take in the workplace to facilitate these employees or to prevent them from becoming this seriously disabled. So we wanted to do something proactive. We wanted to share our experiences around this so that we're not sitting with a huge number of severely ill employees. That, we can keep them well, we can keep them healthy. And that was our primary reason. And we have worked with Stoffel and Carol-Lynn a little bit in this journey in terms of assisting these particular employees. So they have, we know they have really strong insights into what can be done proactively. And also with the focus on mental health. So we all know that, we've all seen the stats that the WHO is expecting it to be one of the leading causes of disability, the key medical issue going forward in the future. And we're seeing it already. So we wanted to talk specifically about mental health. And that's some of the background to why we chose to do this today.
Wow, thank you, and fantastic. And I suppose I've seen the presentations, but I wasn't aware of how much of an impact. And I think it's one of those taboos where we want to hide away from talking around some of these issues. So obviously we're really grateful for your, have these brave conversations to bring this to the forefront. Because I think most organizations do want to be considered as, employers of choice, but it's possibly something that they're not really looking at in a serious way or changing policies to align with that.
Correct. And Ralf, I mean, I can say that's definitely been my observation. The intention is there of most employers. They generally have, they want to look after their employees. I think it's the how that we struggle with most, all of us, including us. So I think hopefully some of that can come out of the discussion today.
Great. And I know that you've got a presentation, and so I'm itching to, and I know it's that long, but it's really impactful. So I don't know if you want to share that, and then we can move through to the other independent contributors.
Awesome. I am trying to
I see we've got people from Nika from Port Elizabeth, Frank, obviously they're following you, Stoffel. So thanks everybody for saying where you're from, and
I suspect so, yes.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Ralf, and thanks for the introduction. So just to start off, I have given some background as to why we choose to do this. My role in Home Mutual is I'm head of claims in a unit called Group Assurance Products, and what we do is we provide risk benefits, primarily death and disability benefits, to employees via their employers. So we insure over 1 million employees, over 1,000 different employers of various sizes, various types of industries, to provide them with the death and disability benefits. One of the products that we offer is income protection or disability, and that's sort of how we became involved in this particular topic. And what that means is that if an employee is unable to work, we pay a particular amount of salary. But at All Mutual, we realized it's really just not good enough to simply be paying a benefit. We wanted to be more proactive. We want to assist employees who can, in fact, go back to work or stay in the workplace to, in fact, stay in the workplace. Our experience has definitely been that there is nothing as draining or difficult for an employee not to be able to work. So that loss of your worker identity, that loss of interaction with your colleagues, there really are significant losses, not just medical, that happen when employees stop working. So we want to be proactive and try and identify ways to try and help employees stay in the workplace. So based on that, maybe just to give some background, over the last 3 to 5 years, probably, we've observed quite a few changes in the types of claims that we're coming through, that we see. So we're definitely seeing more claims coming through. And like I said, we are at the end of a continuum of health. So if we are seeing more claims coming through, it means that as an employer, you are seeing more of this as well in the workplace and having to deal with these types of issues. There are many reasons for more claims coming through. There was a tax change in 2015. We think there's lifestyle factors. There's greater awareness by employees to, in fact, submit claims, better diagnosis of medical conditions, lots of factors around that. But also the quality of claims we're seeing is slightly different. So we're seeing more complex claims coming through, people presenting with multiple medical conditions. Most claims have an underlying mental health sort of issue, either as a primary cause or a secondary type of cause. And excuse me, the other thing we're seeing is a lot of claims coming through where there's issues or disputes within the workplace that are presenting as a medical condition. So it's complicating recovery, it's complicating prognosis, those kind of issues. Sorry about that. And then the other complicating factor, we're seeing a lot more lifestyle related factors. So the impact of poor diet, a very sedentary type lifestyle also coming through in the claims that we're seeing. And then as a consequence of all of this, we're seeing less people able to, in fact, go back to work. So about half of the employees who come back to us do, in fact, go back to work, but we're seeing that rate decline. And to that point, there are many factors that impact on why people are going back to work and why people are not going back to work. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion around this in the session today. And I think there's two sort of key levels. There's an organizational level or organizational factors that impact it. And then there's the actual individual and their medical condition and their particular lifestyle and other factors which impact on their ability to return to work. So this was all pre-COVID. And then we had COVID, which impacted on us. So I just want to share some of our observations in terms of what happened after COVID started. And obviously it is still quite early for an insurer to sort of identify key trends. So, but these are just some of the observations that we've had so far. So in terms of mortality or death, we definitely, the graph on the right shows that increase or that spike in death claims that we had in the sort of July period. And if you think, you know, it's not just the act of losing an employee, losing that skill, losing that production in the workplace. It's the psychosocial impact of losing a colleague or a colleague's immediate family member. It's the cost of insurance that are impacted. So that spike in death claims that we saw really did impact on employers significantly, you know, grief counseling, setting up trauma type programs. It was a difficult period. And, you know, we might experience this again, that employers had to deal with. In terms of morbidity or disability or illness, we actually, particularly in the initial stages of the hard lockdown, saw less claims coming through. We think that this is a logistical sort of factor where employers had probably maybe less access. They were sort of more focused on more basic health and safety measures with employees. So we did see less claims coming through. It seems to be increasing now again, and we are anticipating a lot more claims coming through as some of these impacts are being felt within the organization. One of the key issues there is that we are concerned about the claims not coming through timeously. So again, like I'm sure it will come up many times in this conversation, a key factor, and there's unequivocal research about this, a key factor in terms of managing an employee with medical condition is identifying and managing them early. So if these are being identified at a later period of time due to logistical reasons, due to resources not being in place, whatever the reason might be, it does have a poor outcome for the employee and their ability to recover or improve their health. And the graph talks to that sort of increase in delay that we see.
Hi, Urvashi. So I think we just losing you a little bit. I think. Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, I think your line's just a little bit. Can you?
COVID specifically as a cause of claims. So in our environment, and again, we deal with corporate employers, we see, it says my internet connection is unstable.
No, okay. So I think we're having a little bit of a
I can hear you
technical.
fine.
Okay, is that better, Urvashi?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. So if you want to just. Okay, great. Yeah, we're just losing you a little bit there, but maybe you just want to carry on. So you. Okay. So I do apologize for that. So here we are in the new world of COVID. Urvashi, you there again with us?
I am.
Okay. So do you want to carry on your presentation?
Sure. I do apologize, everybody. I'm sort of in the middle of changing service providers, so not cool.
You can share who it's with later.
Webinar if we didn't have a technical problem. Okay. So like I was saying, in terms of actual COVID claims, we have not as yet seen too many where COVID was the direct cause of claims. We've seen a couple, and our experience of that has generally been those people have been off work for a very short period of time and then recovered and gone back to work. We are, though, cognizant of the clinicians talking about long COVID and long haulers. So we are anticipating those claims coming through in the future. And again, slightly of concern because there's a lot of unknowns around what that actually means, what the recovery is for those particular employees. And then again, we are seeing less people able to return to work during this particular period. For various reasons, employers are less able to accommodate. Employers, I think to some extent, are less willing to accommodate because it is more difficult. There are other pressures within the business that is impacting on that. And then other sort of impacts of COVID that we're seeing is the impact of socioeconomic pressures. So it's very hard for an employer to focus on a disabled employee or to try and get a disabled employee with a medical condition back in the workplace when they have mass retrenchments. They're having to restructure their organization. So that will impact again on employees with medical conditions. Access to healthcare systems has definitely been a problem. We've seen many employees who've come through unable to access medication, unable to access their usual medical treatment because of lockdown, because of fear of going to a hospital. So we and employers have had to think around, workarounds. How do we manage this? And then the impact, we must talk about work from home. So there's challenges, like you just saw, no signal, but also some opportunities that have come through around, now somebody might not have to travel, where that could have been the biggest difficulty that they were having getting to the workplace, is now an opportunity for them to work from home. So that's also something that we've had to think about quite a bit in terms of how we manage employees with medical conditions. And then just lastly, some of the responses. So there's a poll coming through that asks some of these questions. Some of the responses that we've seen employers talk about or discuss to mitigate some of the impact of COVID, but it's actually larger than COVID, of medical conditions generally. So initially we saw a lot of focus on health and safety type measures, putting up screens, getting protective equipment, setting up work from home. That took up quite a lot of energy in the initial stages, and I think will have far-reaching impacts. So a lot of employers, rightly so, thought this is not just about COVID. This is about how we work going forward, how we protect our employees from COVID and from other similar issues, and generally to manage their health. And then the second issue that there was a lot of discussion around was this concept of vulnerable employees. So how do we identify them? How do we manage them in the workplace? It was going through the process of the pure logistics of, do we send out a survey and ask employees to say, I have a medical condition? And now we've got these employees with this particular medical condition. How do I manage them? And the response that I've seen from many of our clients, it really has been quite impressive. Employers really have gone out of their way to accommodate employees. So setting them up to work from home, finding alternative accommodations. And if they couldn't do that, if the employee physically had to be in the workplace, putting up the safety mechanisms to protect them in the workplace. So I think that's been quite great. And again, a good source of learning for us. And then lastly, a lot of talk around what I broadly call wellness measures. So interestingly, in 2017, Mutual did what we call a disability monitor, where we interviewed a number of corporate companies. And we found it interesting that 79% of them said to us at the time that they do in fact have a wellness program. 70% said they have an absenteeism management program. But the comment was generally more around the quality of those programs. So many employers felt that those programs might have a short-term or physical or medical focus more than a long-term health or wellness type focus, and that the focus was really very much on the physical health, whereas we needed to be more proactive. So I thought, and this is one of the reasons why we all put the question in the poll, it's now 3 years later, have we in fact acted on those type of insights? And now that COVID has brought this to the forefront, that we need a more holistic wellness type plan, something that covers not just a short-term medical condition or crisis management. We need something that covers your mental health issues, your ergonomic issues. We need a wellness program that's fairly integrated. So what we found is that many of our employers do have they've got a medical scheme, they've got an insurer, they might have an employee assistance program, they might have occupational health, but often these parties are working in isolation, which is not the most effective way for the end employee, because they are not getting the benefit of that particular, of those multitude of services. And the other question that's being asked right now is, do we have enough data to make sure that these programs are effective? So are we, your medical scheme collects data, your insurer collects data, but are we asking the right questions firstly? What is causing your mental health issue? What is causing your stresses in the workplace? And then secondly, are we putting the data together to come up with targeted solutions? So I think we're at a stage in terms of employee wellness where, and I'm certainly not the expert, but my observation is that the interventions need to be targeted. It can't be sort of generic programs. It needs to be, in my organization, I have a problem in this particular unit as a result of high levels of anxiety or high levels of overtime, and this is what I'm going to do. And then lastly, the question comes around, as it comes all the time, is, are our programs adequately funded? So I do think that employers are beginning to realize that this is no longer some sort of luxury or nice to have for employees. It is key for employees, but also to the organization's health. So it's been pleasing to us that these questions have come to the fore. And, we don't have all the answers as yet, definitely, but employers are definitely starting to think about this and put plans in place. So those are some of our observations. And I think, thank you for the opportunity to share these. I'm looking forward to further discussions on and solutions on tackling these issues. Thanks, Ralf.
Wow, Urvashi, thank you so much. And before, she was saying she doesn't know if she's going to present or not, or even a little bit nervous. You weren't nervous at all. That was amazing. So thank you so much for that. We've already got questions coming in, as I thought, and we've got people asking to contribute with more questionnaires. In fact, people are asking if they can send out questionnaires and results to this group that we can discuss a little bit more. It's obviously very, very big and topical. And when we talk about employees, but as a CEO of an organization that's been disrupted, I definitely was able to put my hand up with my team and say, hey, listen, I've gone through some unique experiences myself that was different. I've definitely got myself a new COVID body. So, and I've found those challenges real and with the team. So I think this is not just affecting the employees, this is affecting all parties. And I think that we're going to get a little bit into that. So Urvashi, thank you so much. And thanks to Old Mutual. And I think we're looking forward to the next 3 series in this. I can see those questions are coming. I think, if you can keep those questions coming, and then we can block them. We've got a couple more polls for you as well. As you saw in the first poll, 55% of people said yes, they feel they have adequate support, but 45% said they don't. And I think that's intuitive of possibly the level of, or the quality of companies that are participating in this panel. They are of a higher quality. So I'd imagine this is something that's real and concerning for a lot of people. And what it's saying is we can do more. So on that note, I'd like to introduce Professor Stoffel Grobler. He's been waiting patiently, and he's got a lot of information and analysis to give us. So I think this is a really enriching conversation that we can have. So over to you, Stoffel.
Thank you very much, Ralf. Thank you, Old Mutual and Topco, for the opportunity to share my passion. And these days I say it's not only a passion, it's become an obsession in some sense. So while I'm talking nonsense, let me see if I can share my screen. Share screen, and there you go. Right. So hopefully I'm going to be able to convince you today that from COVID and beyond, that every month is going to be Mental Health Awareness Month going forward. I saw this quote the other day, and I thought I'd share it. It was in a Harvard Business Review, and it said many companies will need to enhance current practices, supplementing external mental health programs with a greater capacity to deal with anxiety and uncertainty in-house. This does not mean attempting to take the place of trained mental health practitioners, but rather building greater internal awareness of sensitivity toward and ability to address employee concerns. So already Urvashi has set the stage for me as to why we think that some of the skills need to now be taken into the workplace and HR managers and line managers will have to equip themselves with certain skills to support their employees. And the question I would like to ask you already is, so when you start thinking about workplace mental health programs and creating certain skills in-house, whose responsibility will it be? Will it be the line managers? If an employee says, I'm too afraid to come back, is it a disciplinary issue? How are you managing this at the moment? I don't know. I'm not in the corporate environment, but I've been in the environment, the same environment where Urvashi is, and we've known each other for many years, where I do independent assessments for people who become disabled due to mental illness. And I started saying, but hang on, there must be a way to prevent disability. So that's where I started this journey. So, too quick. Right. So one of the questions that I frequently get asked at the moment is, what are the psychological reactions of the population to COVID? And obviously, there's this pervasive fear that everybody is feeling that can contribute to a subjective feeling of distress. And some people have an aspecific and uncontrolled fear that they don't question. There's frustration and boredom that comes from being in quarantine. And then the disabling loneliness for some people. And all of these things create a subjective feeling of distress or a decrease in your well-being. And we know that from there on, we get psychiatric conditions like depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder is well described in the literature at the moment, but also other emotions like anger and fear and distrust we're seeing at the moment. But what I want to make you aware of there is, on the one hand, there's things that on both sides of the bottom two arrows, things that the employer can actually do to reduce the psychiatric conditions or the impact that may lead to a psychiatric condition, and actually assist in making lifestyle changes. So on the one hand, you have things like inadequate supplies, inadequate information. I won't worry too much about the alexithymic traits. That's not something you can do anything about, but that is the traits of somebody who has difficulty putting their emotions into words. But inadequate supplies, you can do something about that. Inadequate information, you can definitely do something about that. And we've seen that this makes a huge difference for our employees in terms of their trust for the employer. But interestingly, you can also do a lot for resilience. And resilience is the ability to bounce back after having been through a tough time. And it's as simple as saying, we've got your back, we will help protect you as an employer. And that promotes resilience in your employees. Social support is as simple as saying, I can see that you're distressed. Are you okay? Because a lot of our social support has been taken away during this time of quarantine. So you as employer can change your mind and say, well, maybe I can be part of that social support. I've never thought about it that way. And in that way, you can then change this person's ability to adapt and become more resilient.
Prof?
So,
yeah. I mean, I love that word, alexithymic. I didn't think I could say it, but it's a new word in my vocabulary. Thank you for that. But it's an interesting point that you mentioned, and maybe it's something should be touched on. In the chat, one of the people saying that they feel a lot of corporates are just ticking boxes when it comes to wellness. And then you talk about alexithymic, and it gives me the observation that sometimes we ask people to scale or rate how they feel 0 to 10, where in fact they struggle to get the emotions out. But if we can ask an open-ended question about how are you feeling about the wellness program in our surveys, that might allow people then to open up a little bit more and to feel heard, possibly, instead of just being rated in terms of numbers.
True that, absolutely, yeah, agree with that wholeheartedly. And there's something to be said to actually teach people the vocabulary, because many people don't have the vocabulary to talk about mental distress, and COVID has shoved distress in our faces, and we have no choice anymore but to address it and to give words to what we're feeling and what we're experiencing. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I ask the strict question to the medical students when I train them, and I ask how common is mental illness. And the reason is that when they are trained in the psychiatric hospitals, they very often see people with schizophrenia, serious mental illness, people with bipolar, but those are actually not as common as people think they are in terms of mental illnesses. What we refer to as the common mental disorders is actually major depressive disorder, and 1 in 10 people will in a lifetime suffer from a depressive episode, and 1 in 5 people live with anxiety disorders. In fact, if you go and Google that specific statistic, then on the SADC website, you will see that they say that this is endemic in South Africa, is actually anxiety. So just to make it a bit more practical for you, there's about, let me quickly check. Oh, no, I can't see. I'm on share screen. But I think at the last check, there's about 200 people who are on this webinar. So if we were in a room full of people, you could have divided that room by 10, and then you would have come up with a number of the amount of people in the room who actually will possibly have a depressive episode in a lifetime, and twice that amount will have an anxiety disorder. So what I'm saying to employers is you can't get away from it. It's around you. It might be even you who have an anxiety or a depressive episode. So I don't know why it took us so long to actually start saying, hang on, but let's discuss this. Let's start breaking down the stigma and do something about it. There's a wonderful study that I make South Africans aware of that was published last year in one of the psychiatric journals as to how common is mental disorders. They looked at the prevalence, the 12-month prevalence, and the lifetime prevalence. In other words, before they came to university and at the moment, how many of them had common mental disorders. So about 25% had major depression in a lifetime, and generalized anxiety about 22%. But interestingly, nearly 40% already could be diagnosed with mental illness. So what I'm saying to employers, if this is the case, if first-year students at Stellenbosch University, if so many of them already had been diagnosed with mental illness, fast forward 4 years when they finish their degree and they enter the job market, again, you cannot run away from the fact that people have mental disorders and they're going to enter your place of work. So I have a poll here. I think it's my first poll. So I'm going to ask the audience to guess how common is mental illness in the workplace. So at present, or last year before COVID, because the stats that I have are pre-COVID, I'm curious what do people think is, how common is mental illness? And you can say 5%, 10%, 15, 20, or 30. Ralf, do we wait?
Yeah, I mean, those stats are going to come through now, but you're saying that this is pre-COVID?
Yes, this is pre-COVID.
Wow.
So this was 2019. This is a study in 2019 and in the UK.
In the UK, okay. And so you're saying South Africa is generally higher anyway, and this is pre-COVID?
This is pre-COVID, yes.
Fantastic. Okay, we'll get clicking, guys. But yeah, be interesting to see those results coming through now.
So if you go and do your own research, you'll probably find that there's different statistics, like always with statistics, but you will see, up to 1 in 7 and so on. But this particular study, so I use this to try kind of make you as HR managers and C-suite level managers and so on aware of the fact that there are people in your employ that are mentally ill. Do we have the results yet, Ralf?
I think we're still getting it. Some of the people, so we're looking now, some people are putting in the chat their results as opposed to the polls. So if you just go to polls, it will come up. So here's the results.
Right, okay, and 45% were right of this group. So the answer is actually 30%. So 30% of the UK workforce in the Mental Health at Work Report 2019 had been formally diagnosed with a mental health condition at some point in their lifetime. 39%, nearly 40%, reported experiencing poor mental health symptoms related to work in the last year. And only 13% of managers have attended training that focused on mental health. And again, this is a new conversation to South Africa. So that's where I want to take this conversation today, is that actually managers should be equipped with the skills to talk to employees who are in distress. And then just another little study which people might not, well, not a little study, it's actually a very big study by the London School of Economics that compared 7 or 8 countries in terms of what depression costs them. And what they found is that 49% of South Africans take 0 sick days. They keep working in spite of their depression. And I've been wondering a lot about this. You know, why would this be? Is it because they know that they're mentally ill, but they're too afraid to ask for sick days because they're afraid of stigma? Or is it possibly because they actually don't know that they're depressed? Because we know that only 1/3 of people with depression actually gets diagnosed with depression. And only about 9% of people with an anxiety disorder gets diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. So if you as an employer think of this, and now you're going to think, okay, but presenteeism is costing us a lot. So people with depression are at work, yet they're not functioning as well as they could be. The concentration is not as good as it could be. So what this study has found, and this is 7 other countries compared to 7 other countries as well, we spend by far the most, or we lose by far the most money when it comes to presenteeism. So in the region of about 200 billion rand. And again, this is a 2016 study. So this is way before COVID. And presenteeism means attending work whilst unwell. So the dark blue part is the absenteeism part. The light blue part is employees that are at work but are not functioning well because they might not even know that they are suffering from depression. So this is a very busy slide, and I apologize for that, but this was me deconstructing after 7 of 8 years, well actually this slide is about 5 years old, deconstructing why people end up permanently disabled or temporarily disabled. And I'm not going to go into the detail of this, but what I realized eventually is the place where we have to intervene to prevent disability, first and foremost, is in the workplace. We need to go there where the people are already maybe struggling at work. And this next slide, I love this slide, and this was the Stevenson's Pharma Review in 2016, also in the UK. Visually gives us an indication of what our workforce look like. So you have a big part that are thriving at work, then you have a smaller part that might be struggling at work due to depression or anxiety or some other factors. And then you have a smaller part who are ill, possibly off work. And now with COVID, I think the 2 smaller circles will probably have increased in size. And again, we know that in the UK, it cost them 42 billion. The American figure I have there is actually a worldwide figure in terms of what the cost of mental illness to the countries, and that's $1 trillion. Yet we know that 80% of people who get the right treatment will get better. So what we're doing at the moment is we're still reactive, and we're not looking at where the symptoms of the problems are already there maybe, and we can early intervene, or actually being proactive and preventing mental illness from developing at all. So that's where we should be focusing. So my second poll is, I would like the audience to tell me what they think the return on investment is. Well, firstly, it might come as a surprise to you that there's actually a return on investment on mental health programs, and there's lots of research that has been done. So I'm curious as to what people think would be the return on investment for every pound spent on workplace mental health programs. So you can choose between 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8.
So funny because I think in South Africa, so many sports teams, if they fail, they say that they didn't, it was mental, their mental strength. And so we know in performance, it comes down to mental, and how much are we investing in our people with that, looking to get output and productivity from our people, our managers, our leaders. And then are we investing the same, knowing that a lot of the result is mental? I used to run a lot, and the saying was it was 20% ability and 80% mental.
Yeah, absolutely. And can I go on then from there? Ralf, do you have the results yet?
You can launch those results just now. Perfect. Here we go.
Okay, so, and the majority is actually right. So the return on investment on average is about £4 for every £1 spent. So in South Africa, I don't think there has been research like that at all, because I don't think mental health programs at work are that common in South Africa, so we can't do the research. But what the Stevenson Farmer Review found, that was for every £1 spent, the return on investment was £4.20, with a range between 40 pence and £9. So with that, I'm also saying you get workplace mental health programs and obviously workplace mental health programs. So some would give you a good return on investment and some a not so good return on investment. I use and this is another report that I referred to earlier, the time to take ownership report. Heathrow as an example. So what Heathrow found is that they had an 80% decline in work-related stress absence in 2018. And what they did is they didn't take only one workplace mental health program. They went and they did their research. They looked at what they already were doing. They looked at a couple of mental health programs and designed their own workplace mental health program. And for them, it has worked really well. And then a similar report in Canada, the Deloitte Insights report, again, around $4.10 Canadian dollars with a company called Bell Canada. It's a telecommunications company. So point I'm making is there's a definite return on investment, apart from the fact that you're decreasing presenteeism for people. A friend of mine, Sid Pimer, recently told me about Stoffel. Remember, you're selling medicine, not candy. And the fact of the matter is workplace mental health programs is in a sense medicine, but like I told you that it can become part of the positive things you can do to make your workforce more resilient by being socially supportive and supporting them when they're starting to struggle at work, because we know that early recognition and treatment will keep the person at work and not have them end up with in the risk pool with Old Mutual. And then also a reminder that it's not only pills that can improve productivity. Medication is obviously one. I'm a psychiatrist, so I prescribe medication sometimes, but therapy, exercise, mindfulness meditation, speaking to coaches, all of that is a form of medicine in this sense. So what can you as employers do about return to work anxiety? And I'm just going to page to this because I had a whole list of things here. Firstly, and again, this is the Harvard Business Review, make employees' well-being your top priority. Make sure that you share accurate, timely, and transparent information. There's I think it's the what's his name? The governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, has apparently become one of the most trusted sources in the USA for COVID-19 guidance because of his transparent and regular briefings. So any company can do that. Transparent and regular briefings. This is where we are. We're going into a second wave now. And ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you that it seems we are going into a second wave, and that will again increase everybody's anxiety levels around COVID. So share the information, be honest.
How are you doing?
Hi, hello.
Not ready for you, yeah? Oh, you're in a meeting.
And
No, it's fine. I just
take swift action to implement the recommended public health measures. Train your leaders, train your managers and colleagues on how to support employees, and you will have to be flexible according to this report in terms of working from home or a hybrid working from home and sometimes from the office. So what can you do? You can give them good quality information. One of the programs that I found, and I'm not selling this program, I'm just telling you what my research led me to, is specifically is IACT, and thereby you can supplement your external mental health programs, train managers, educate your employees, and thereby create a psychologically safe space where early recognition can take place for people with mental health challenges. And so what you also want to do whilst you're doing the workplace mental health programs is starting to create what we call mental health champions at work. So people who can be the flag bearers for mental illness and mental health challenges and can start breaking down that stigma. I strongly encourage, and I know Carol-Lynn will refer to this, companies to start writing stay at work and return to work policies, start talking about the elephant in the room, start talking about mental health challenges, and share your stories openly. And what we found, the research tells us that the top-down approach is definitely the most successful. So the more leaders come out and share their challenges or just endorse these programs, we know that the more successful these programs will be. So IACT aims to reduce stigma. It offers a first basic response approach along with proactive focus on improving well-being to help build resilience. It teaches managers to identify signs of distress and support the employee. And there's one course for managers and there's also one course for employees. So it will give managers who do the course the ability to have a greater understanding of mental health and well-being issues. It will give them tools of how to reduce stigma and promote well-being and build resilience. It will teach them literally how to engage and communicate with colleagues in distress, and it will equip them with practical tools as to where to access help and further support, and they in the process become an accredited IACT manager, and thereby creating psychologically safe spaces. And unfortunately, you can't create a psychological safe space in the presence of stigma. So I always have to say something about stigma. Abraham Lincoln said melancholy is an affliction, not a weakness, and we know that he had bouts of severe depression throughout his life. So the other day I read a quote that said, if you say to somebody with depression, why are you unhappy? Life is beautiful. It's similar to saying to somebody with asthma, why are you struggling to breathe? There's so much air around you. It's not just a matter of snapping out of it. It's an affliction. It is an illness. It is a disease. It affects the brain, and people with the right information can recover and stay at work. Not everybody with anxiety and depression needs to go off work. In fact, the minority should go off work. So in conclusion, I told you about the workplace. This is where we can make a difference. And if things go pear-shaped, or if a person really struggles, you can refer to a GP or your EAP. They might end up seeing a psychologist for psychotherapy. They might end up in the risk pool. And usually what happens then is the insurer refers to an occupational therapist who does functional capacity assessment, job analysis, state work, return to work plan, and then helps the person return to work. What I'm suggesting today is take a shortcut sometimes. So if you have an employer that is struggling at work, rather sooner than later involve an occupational therapist. That's their scope of practice. It's them that actually will help with the reasonable accommodations. And don't wait. I know we're probably going to have this conversation later on about disability and the definition of disability. Don't wait for a person to fulfill the definition of disability criteria in terms of the Employment Equity Act. Make reasonable accommodation part of your vocabulary. So in the end, accept that COVID-19 and preventative measures to spread the disease is not going to go away anytime soon. Accept that the psychological impact has been profound and will continue being so for the foreseeable future. Somebody said the other day, this is a dragon with a very, very long tail. Implement workplace mental health programs, create mental health champions at work, adopt a preventative rather than reactionary approach to mental health issues, start writing those policies, and consult with occupational therapists sooner rather than later. And I don't know if we're going to go to questions now, or Ralf, I'm assuming we'll wait for the end.
Yeah, I think time's against us a little bit. So I think we want to go through Carol-Lynn's presentation. Firstly, thank you so much, Prof. I've actually read that and you've gone through it. So that's the third time for me, but I found it so interesting. There's so many takeaways from me. It was really, and I was looking at the questions. I almost get the feeling that just having an understanding of the issue is probably a big issue, because then we can start being empathetic to our people around how we can solve some of these and direct them to the right people. And I think leading to that, I think you've almost done the introduction for me for Carol-Lynn Stirrat, our occupational therapist, and just, we're very grateful to obviously have you presenting. So Carol-Lynn, over to you. We'll get to the questions as soon as we finish with Carol-Lynn. So please put them in the Q&A in the meantime. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralf. Good morning, everyone. I just need to correct you. There was a typo on your introduction slide. I'm not a doctor. It said doctor, so I'm just correcting that quickly. I see we've got a lot of OTs on the panel that are all cheering Prof's comments there about OT. So my conversation is around occupational disruption in the face of COVID-19 and the value of occupational therapy as part of the collaborative solution. Oops, no slide, sorry. Sorry, my slide is not moving.
And I apologize for calling you doctor. It was just so professional. I thought you were one. So
No.
I must apologize for that.
So occupation is core to the philosophy of occupational therapy. And occupations refer to the everyday tasks. Sorry guys, my slides have got a life of their own here. I just want to change something here. Occupations refer to the everyday activities that people do as individuals, which includes paid employment in families and with communities to occupy time and bring meaning and purpose to life. And with this pandemic, we have had massive global disruption in occupations. Now, occupational therapy services, importantly, can look at the preservation of occupational identity for persons who have or are at risk for developing an illness, disease, or disability. I'm going to start off by sharing some experiences of disruption that I have received from clients of mine. So Thabo is an HR practitioner in his 40s. He's on temporary disability for a psychosocial health condition, and he's been actively engaged in vocational rehabilitation and is ready to resume work. But because of the economic climate compounded by COVID-19, his business unit is no longer viable, and there's an indefinite moratorium on certain roles that he might have been considered suited to due to COVID-19. So Thabo has had to opt for early voluntary retrenchment. Kathy is a team leader in sales. She has a known psychosocial health condition, but this was well controlled before COVID, but currently she's struggling. She's battling to lead virtually, meet her targets, do online schooling with her children while dealing with the loss of a family member from COVID. And for Kathy, the workplace also gave her structure and social connection. So with work from home, she's really battling with routine and loneliness. Additional challenges that have been highlighted by employees in the literature about the work situation include work from home space. And this has been more of a challenge for some employees. Work-life balance, maintaining boundaries between work and non-work, reduced resources. We know that there have been job losses and retrenchments, and this has increased the load on employees that are already feeling overwhelmed. And there is changed work practice. So there's concerns about the impact on collaboration, that there might be a culture erosion and possible loss of soft skills. And the soft skills refers more to younger employees that do not have the opportunity to learn face-to-face in the work environment. And some of our employees also struggling to engage over the remote platforms. Consider an employee who's hard of hearing. Employees have also had to acquire new skill sets. They have to be more flexible, they have to be agile, they have to move faster, decisions have to be made a lot quicker, and they have to adapt to change and be resilient. And what we have also found is that non-verbal and socio-emotional cues are potentially harder to pick up virtually, so it might be more difficult for managers to detect if an employee is struggling with work from home. And all of this is set in the broader context of our economic climate, which makes opportunities for return to work that much more difficult. So I've highlighted 4 occupation disruption scenarios. In the first scenario, you might have employees that were COVID-19 positive and they have recovered, but they're suffering lingering symptoms. And Urvashi referred to the World Health Organization, and they've noted that some patients develop medical complications that may have long-lasting health effects. And this could include things like ongoing fatigue, poor concentration, impaired sleep patterns, muscle pain, the sort of long haulers. But we still don't know enough about this. A second scenario could be employees that had existing health conditions, physical or psychosocial, but they were well controlled. But these have become exacerbated during the pandemic, and there's many reasons for this exacerbation. Or you could have employees that were well and they're presenting with a new onset of a health condition. And Urvashi also touched on the vulnerable employees. So these are employees that have been identified as being at increased risk for severe illness, and these are covered by the CDC. But all of these aspects or these scenarios could potentially impact on the burden of disease. Now, Prof. Grobler has gone through this, but if we look at the potential impact, there was an article in Business Day on the 27th of October, And they are expecting that the disability rates will increase because of the pandemic. There was an article in Finance 24 towards the end of 2018, and those headlines were "Distracted employees cost South African business up to 89 billion a year." So these are distracted employees who, despite being present in the workplace, are unproductive, and Prof. Grobler referred to the presenteeism. And the distractions can be due to things like personal reasons, for example, sick family members and bereavement, financial matters, which include issues such as indebtedness, and physical and mental health issues. And one can only anticipate the potential impact from COVID if we look at those figures from pre-COVID. And there was also a recent article by the Harvard Business School, which looked at COVID-19 in the workplace, implications, issues, and insights for future research and action. And they are anticipating that we are going to have an increase in presenteeism. So how do we move from occupational disruption to occupational engagement? Well, occupational therapists are very well positioned to assist with this. Sorry, that's my slide.
Carol-Lynn, did you see the results of the survey?
I didn't. What were they? Sorry, Ralph?
It was 86% of people felt that soft skills couldn't be learnt at home. So it's quite a lot. And there's only 14 felt it could. Is that surprising?
I think if one looks at the literature, I don't think it is surprising, because we really do learn a whole lot of ways of engaging by actually watching other people and being mentored and see how they actually deal with situations in the workplace. But this is especially for newer, younger employees. So we can start by looking at fitness to work, and I've just highlighted 3 possible scenarios. So you might have employees who are returning to work after recovery from COVID-19. You could have employees at work where you're picking up this trend of absenteeism. There's a drop-off in performance, altered productivity, possibly a change in behavior, or you have employees that are presenting with new health events. And in all of these scenarios, an occupational therapist can assist you with a work or functional capacity evaluation. In the first scenario, this is coupled with medical fitness for work, and this is done by a medical practitioner. And the National Institute for Occupational Health has very good guidelines in terms of this. So what we do as occupational therapists is we look at a person's capacity to perform the inherent or the essential requirements of their job. And depending on the employee's health condition and job demands, our methodology can vary, but it could include a physical capacities assessment, a cognitive and or a psychosocial assessment, and it would include a job analysis, because we need to determine the inherent requirements of their job, and we often couple this with the worksite visit. And stakeholder engagement is critical, and at this point it's normally with the line manager, because we need to get a really good sense of what challenges this employee has been experiencing in the workplace. We cannot assess an employee in isolation. We have to assess them in their specific context or their specific environment. And we have to look at the interrelationship between all of these factors and the impact that this has on occupational performance and participation. So if we just have a look at this model, we would assess the person, the occupation, the job, and the environment, and then the impact on the performance. And in terms of COVID, the stresses in the environment have increased substantially, and I've only highlighted a few there for you. And this includes the fear of contamination on return to work. We have ongoing uncertainty about the future, and there's also stigma for employees that have tested positive for COVID. So once we've done our assessment and we've gathered all of our information, we then need to come up with tailor-made targeted interventions. And these interventions can be directed at the person, and there are many interventions. I've just highlighted a few for you. Perhaps they need skills-based interventions such as anxiety and stress management, more effective coping skills, work-life balance, or resilience building, and Prof. Grobler has spoken about the resilience side of things. Or we target our interventions at the occupation or the job, and this typically would include things like reasonable accommodations. Now, everything that we do has to be underpinned and supported by interventions at an organization or a system level. And these are just some examples of what you can be doing from an organization level. And the first thing that I've put up there is to ensure a safe working environment to decrease fear of contamination or danger. So this comes up a lot in the literature. The employees are anxious to come back to work in fear of actually contracting the virus. And this is actually a principle that has been identified for successful return to work in the workplace before COVID. And this is a workplace where there is a strong commitment to health and safety. There's also been a lot of discussion about the spotlight on awareness and education, including the training of managers to prevent disability, and Prof. Grobler has gone through this. This could also include things like encouraging your employers to attend for their routine screening and checkups and their appointments so that we can prevent long-term impact from that. It could be looking at self-management strategies to promote well-being, individual and team resilience building, and also in terms of, do make sure your employees know who your EAP service provider is, how they can access them, and what services your EAP provider can give them. For example, can they use the EAP service for family members who might be experiencing distress? Prof. Grobler has spoken about the specific training of managers, and in COVID, it is very important that managers are trained to recognize difficulties remotely and also how to give support remotely. And what also keeps on coming up is that there needs to be a lot of focus on looking after our managers at this stage, because they are going to find themselves under increased load. Prof. Grobler spoke about communication. Again, it's repeated that you need to share accurate and timely information. For example, what is the work from home policy? What is the policy if I've tested COVID, I have now recovered, and I want to return to work? And an agile response. So what we would like to see is we'd like to see that managers being able to quickly flag at-risk employees and access the required resources. In terms of dealing with loneliness and loss of social connection, there's a lot of talk about virtual happy hour, virtual coffee dates, and a hybrid work solution or hybrid work practice where your employees will work partly from home and partly from the office. Prof. Grobler has spoken about the importance of support and regular contact between the manager and the employee, and this is preferably over a video call so that you can pick up cues. We need an organizational culture that promotes well-being, and Prof. Grobler spoke about the top-down approach, the manager walking the talk, and in this case, the managers need to adhere to all those safety procedures that have been put in place in terms of risk of spreading the virus, wearing their masks, practicing social distancing, etc. And really all of this needs to be underpinned with strategies, policies, and procedures for managing ill health and disability in the workplace. Now, in order for this intervention to succeed, we really need multi-stakeholder collaboration. And this could include liaising with the employee's medical team, HR, line manager, wellness, EAP. We've got occupational medical practitioners. We don't want a fragmented approach. And we're very much looking at a disability management approach. This has been spoken on by Urvashi and Prof. Grobler. We want to prevent. We want proactive early identification and intervention to prevent further disability. And the gold standard is really stay at work and early return to work. And there is definitely a business case for following this. And some example of stats here, it's estimated that 50% of people out of work for 8 weeks will not return to work. And 85% of people out of work for 6 months or more will never return to work on a sustained basis. And we do our assessments and we manage the employee within the legislative context. And I've just highlighted a few of the acts and the 2017 technical assistance guidelines that we use to assist us in this process. And then lastly, just to conclude, is to look at the opportunities that COVID has brought us. And Urvashi touched on the work from home option, being able to flex. But what we've seen is that the migration to virtual or online platforms has been accelerated with the pandemic. And this also holds true for telehealth. And telehealth is providing health services to individuals either telephonically or over video conferencing. And this has given us a platform to allow for increased accessibility. It's made us more agile, and it's also provided employees with a safer option versus actually seeing the healthcare practitioner in person. And it's hoped that the opportunity that could also come out of COVID is that organizational policies and procedures, specifically with regards to mental health in the workplace, can also be accelerated. Thank you.
Wow, I think we've got a quick question coming up. Thank you, Carol-Lynn. I think one of the things that we were going to get to really was that there needs to be a marked investment from organizations, not just in time and effort, but collaboratively to bring all these stakeholders together. And, you know, we talk about a new language. And so how do we do that? One of the easiest ways that I saw is to create posters within the environment. I'm not sure how we do it at home. Talking around the burden of meetings and Zoom calls and those sorts of things, as you can see all of us, it makes you a little bit closer to all of us and trust us better. One of the things is turn your cameras on at the beginning of a meeting and just let everybody know and see you and wave. I think that brings down. But we've got some of your questions. And so what I'm going to do is quickly go through them. They are in the Q&A. I've got 7 so far. I know some people have put them in the chat, so I'll get to that afterwards. We're going to start with the Q&A. We've got 20 minutes. So we're going to try and burn through this. Thank you for the interest. I know this is a valuable topic. So first to Frank Fourie, we all had to work remotely, and many employees would continue working remotely due to revised business models. My concern is that employees will get emotionally distant and not feel part of a bigger tribe, feeling isolated and forget how to interact with others. Digital connection is just not the same as being in someone's presence. We are implementing flexible working time and conditions. What is your opinion on the mental health on the long-term working remotely on a permanent basis? Let's open it up. Prof, do you want to start? Because I know you're itching. You were silent there for a while.
I'll start. Thank you, Frank, for the question. And I've been reading up a lot about the changes as well, and that we're losing what's called the water cooler conversations, amongst other things, and that a lot of creativity takes place in the water cooler. But I think what we're going to see is a lot more education. So what we're doing here today is to make people aware of the dangers of isolating yourself and looking after your mental health. And then we're going to have to adapt. And human beings are resilient, and we have no choice but to adapt. So people will find different ways of socializing and still attending to that part of their life. And when I say socializing, I don't only mean in terms of our personal social life. I mean in terms of the privilege, I'm going to say, of going to work every day that I have, and actually sharing time and spending time with colleagues whom I really get along well with. And what my daughter has done, she's I always forget what she does, information designer. She designs information, and she works in Pretoria, and she works from home. And what they've done now is they meet for coffee. Obviously with social distancing measures in place with her fellow employees, just to have those conversations sometimes outside of work. So I think what we're going to find is that people are going to be more creative, but also I would like to for employers to take part in this. Don't just sit and wait for them to be creative. Be creative on your own and create safe spaces for people to actually have those water cooler conversations, even though it might be virtual.
And Carol-Lynn, what are your thoughts?
I think this whole hybrid work practice might be really helpful, so that you can connect in the workplace and you have a balance between the online and being in the workplace. And I think what Prof has said, it's those informal chats that we miss when we online. But I know a lot of companies are doing amazing things with their virtual happy hours, and they're having a lot of team building sessions, tequila hours. They're having great things. Different parts of the team have actually got to prepare for that presentation, and that is really, really keeping people more connected.
Wow, thank you. Urvashi, what's your...
Yeah, thanks, Rob. I can only share my personal experience. So firstly, I want to say, for those of us who are working at home, I think we must recognize that it's a privilege, because there are a lot of employees who are out there in the workplace and who are being quite exposed and are at risk. So for me, I think it really, I mean, yes, I think we're going to have to find creative solutions around it, because I don't see, I personally, this is my personal opinion, I personally don't think we're ever going to go back to this everybody working from huge offices scenario again. So as managers, we're going to have to find alternative ways. But I think the one key thing as well is to understand your individual needs. So there's some of us, and I think it's most of us on this side of the panel, Ralf, who are introverts, who have lesser need, frankly, than the extroverts. And I think understanding that distinction and understanding who needs what is going to be a key in terms of managing this scenario. Newer employees need more sort of interaction than more seasoned employees. So I think it's a great challenge for managers to understand their people and give them sort of tailor-made packages.
For sure, thank you. So we've got the results of that last poll. Are hybrid work practices a thing of the future? 97% think so. So, I did a podcast yesterday with the HR director of Microsoft, and they feel more or less the same way. And I think they're building software around that as well. So I've heard some organizations do 4 days on for employees, 10 days off, and they have different teams rotating as well, to allow for the contraction of the disease. So let's move on to anonymous attendee. Are corporates educated, aware, or equipped to understand anxiety and depression in the workplace? And what can we do to ensure they are?
Can I answer that again first, or give my 6 minutes worth of?
For sure.
I don't think they are. I do think that they need mental health care providers to educate them, and people who actually understand it. So I'm not only referring to myself, but to occupational therapists and counseling and clinical psychologists as well. I think there's an opportunity now with COVID actually to close that gap and get educated with evidence-based programs like the one that I suggested, but there are many out there that people can look at. So I think it's time that they start educating themselves.
Yeah, thank you for that. Carol-Lynn?
Ralf, I think as well what a lot of employers can do is also have those conversations with their wellness providers and their EAP service providers, and to see if they could also bring that training in. If it's part of the contract that they've got, they, use them and see if they can do that training as well.
Urvashi, I mean, one of the things that we obviously did is we had consultants for how to make sure the environment was safe. So it's just reaching out to different people in different modes. Is that what you were thinking?
Yeah, definitely. It's about access to the correct expertise. And I think it talks to what we were saying earlier around sort of mental health type issues. It's no longer sort of things that you can, Prof made the point that you can sort of shrug off. It is part of everybody's lives in the workplace every day. So we're going to have to make the effort to understand better. And understanding leads to managing that issue of stigma that the Prof also spoke about, which I guess because I'm in the environment, it still worries me though that in 2020 there's still a stigma around mental health issue, and the key to that is around the education. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I'm going to the next question. It's Fiona Wakeland, and she's really trying to and test me with my pronunciation. I can see there's a question coming here. So thank you for fascinating discussion. I'd like to know if mental health conditions, if mental health is so prevalent as to be normal, the terms used to describe them are purgative, i.e. illness, disorder. Can we come up with new terminologies so those who are sufferers don't have to deal with the negative label as well as the condition?
Thank you. Yeah, I saw that question, Fiona. Thank you very much. Difficult one. What we try and do is actually teach people to start changing their language. But having said that, unfortunately, our medical literature still would refer to it as major depressive disorder and anxiety disorders. And I don't foresee that happening in the near future if you get a diagnosis that the doctor will use different terms. But I do think that we as community should break down the stigma, be able to talk about our anxiety disorders. I, for example, share my anxiety disorder openly. I've shared it in a medical journal as well. I have generalized anxiety disorder. I'm very good at worrying. But there's a strong case to be made to check our language, to not refer to people as depressives, but to refer to use language like mental health challenges, and not to label people. So as community, I think, or as members of an organization, we should steer clear from stigmatizing language, and it is definitely a challenge.
Ralf, can I say, I used to work as an OT in a long-term psychiatric hospital many years ago. And I used to look at some of the really old files, like 30, 40 years old. And I can say some of the terminology that used to be used, it was vile, actually. I can't even repeat it. So the point I'm trying to make is that there has been some progress made, and maybe, yeah, that progress will be accelerated now that we become more aware of it.
Yeah, it's so interesting. We did a survey, Enneagramming, and they code you 1 to 9, and it's unhealthy or healthy. And so that was a good way of referencing someone who was out of alignment. So another thing we didn't know about you, Urvashi. Carol-Lynn, what are your thoughts?
I was just thinking it's great to be an occupational therapist because we do not have to focus on diagnosis per se. We are going to focus on the functional impact on the ability to do their job. That is our focus. So we don't have to meet a line manager and talk about the employee who's got major depressive disorder or anxiety. We're looking at their capacity to do their job, and that is the focus of my conversation with a manager when I'm working with an employee.
Sure.
Diagnosis does not have to come into it at all. It's the functional impact.
Yeah. Can I just add to this conversation as well? Thanks. Sorry for interrupting, Carol-Lynn. But yes, yeah, I think that's what makes OTs amazing. That they don't focus on the illness. They focus on what can we do to help this person still function well at work. But I would like to remind people that just like you have mental health, or like you have physical health, you have mental health. So you might have a diagnosis of anxiety and anxiety disorder. But I'm interrupting myself. So if you have hypertension on the one hand, and you take your medication, you make your lifestyle changes, if they test my blood pressure today, it will be normal. So I have the illness hypertension, but at the moment my blood pressure is normal. So I'm physically healthy. In the same way, mental health. So if you give the right education and do the right things and make the lifestyle changes and possibly take medication, you may have a name for a disorder, but you are mentally healthy. I just want people to understand it from that point of view as well.
We're going into some very interesting territory, but I just want to get through these questions. One question I was going to ask is that my son had ADHD, and he was taking, was it Ritalin? And we found that he would concentrate more at school, but he was functioning very emotionally at home afterwards. He was very tired, he wouldn't eat. And so we made the decision with asking him, what do you want to do? He said, no, not take it. And I wouldn't say he's thriving. We're still supporting him. He's very intelligent, but we see him as a happy person as opposed to a very unhappy young child. And so it begs the question, do you have to monitor even the medication and just make sure you can supplement it? So we had to get someone to help him, tutor him. We had to support him, making sure he ate the right foods and diet and exercise and those sorts of things. So we tried to fulfill him being healthy in other areas. Is that quite common?
I think, so yes, my approach would be, sorry, no, I'm jumping in, but it's a medication-related question. My approach is that every person, even when I was in private practice many years ago, I would say to a person, they would come in and say, just don't prescribe anything to me. And I'd say, but that's a personal choice. My job is to give you information My job is not to tell you to do something specifically. And there's so many other options before you get to medication for lots of the common mental disorders. So even for depression and anxiety, we know that things like meditation, mindful meditation, exercise, is as effective as first-line drug therapy. So the point being is, I don't think we should see it as an either or. There's a whole spectrum of disorders and there's a whole spectrum of solutions, and medication is one of the solutions sometimes. But in the end, I respect every person and every parent's decision in this regard. And as long as the person is a happy person and has a quality of life, then I think everybody wins.
Sure, thank you. So let's get to the next question. Employers aren't trained to deal with mental health issues adequately, and in some ways neither are HR representatives. Do you feel that employers should engage or contact with mental health experts in order to get this right? I think you kind of did answer that. Is there anybody who want to? I think that was a big thumbs up.
The answer is yes.
Definitely. So it's not just engage, but maybe get a suite of occupational therapists, practitioners who can support you, not one or two. So maybe engage with several experts. Okay, thank you for that question, Anonymous. And Anonymous again, should all of this responsibility for mental health fall upon the employer and the insurer? Isn't there also a responsibility in the government health system, medical aids to assist with this and provide more and better health cover for individuals? That is a good question.
Well, Urvashi, I want you to help me answer this question, because for people struggling, a lot of the research that I've been doing is I have so much compassion for the person who I have to see as an independent medical assessor when they started to go into the risk pool and they're struggling to work, they can't work anymore. And then I see how the system actually reinforces the disability. And I do think that this is something that the government should start looking at in terms of definitions of disability, in terms of support for people struggling at work. When should you do reasonable accommodation? But one of the frustrations I have is, for example, a person wants to go back to work, but is not ready to go back to work. So this person needs occupational therapy. They need vocational rehabilitation. The medical aid that the insurer is allowed, and this is my understanding, to pay for the rehabilitation, but not allowed to pay for the medication. The medical aid has to pay for the medication. And if the medical aid runs out, the person has to pay themselves. Yet frequently you find that people who end up in that position are struggling financially. So now they're caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. They can't afford the medication anymore. So they stop taking the medication because their medical aid has run out. So it's a really tough question, that, and I do think that the government, I hope somebody is listening that can take this further. There's many questions that I have that are similar.
Yeah, I mean, I do think some insurers are starting to look for ways around that, in the sense of looking for sort of, you know, for example, we partnered with a disease management type program to assist certain categories, to assist exactly with people who don't have access to the medical care from state facilities. But again, you know, our reach as an insurer is limited. So the key is, outside of the question, outside of employers and insurers, you know, who else is going to take responsibility? I do think there's an awareness, you know, from what I've seen, and there's an improvement in some of the public health offerings that we see. But again, it's really about resourcing and funding, that we really are so far away from the ideal situation. So practically, I think employers and insurers and other sort of private organizations are going to have to step up to fill the gap in the interim.
Carol-Lynn, did you have anything to add? I kind of agree with you as well. It certainly seems that way.
I think from my experience, we're finding that a lot of insurers on a case-by-case basis are willing to fund occupational therapy, vocational rehabilitation, if we are able to get the person back to work. And in a lot of instances, we have to advise our clients to go to the public health sector, get their medication from there, and access psychiatrists and psychologists from public health if they can no longer afford it, because they have to be optimally managed. And some of them have done that very successfully. So again, it's that whole partnership and really collaboration from a lot of stakeholders that have got to work together to try and get this person back into the workplace. And that is what we also do as occupational therapists. We often have a function of a case manager or return to work coordinator. So for example, if we've assessed an employee and we find that there's a whole lot of things that need to be addressed, we're often the one that puts all of those things in place, and we manage that whole process in order to try and get them back into the workplace, obviously with support and everything from the insurer and other stakeholders.
So thank you for that, Carol. And I'm just mindful of time, but we've got about a minute to go. So I'm just thinking we're going to close with the last question. We will look at these questions and get back to you privately with the answers. But, can you provide guidance on the workplace acquired COVID-19 compensation claim? Can any employee claim, or are there dynamics that should be fulfilled prior to application of the claim? Is there a physical loss that an employee should have suffered before deeming a claim valid?
I think there's two parts to the question. One is around a workman's compensation or a COIDA claim. I don't have the details around that type of process. I think you can find that on the website. Around an insurance claim, it really depends on the product that you have with the insurer. So if you've got an occupational disability product, what the insurer is looking for is, has the condition stopped them from working as a result of impairment? And if that's so, then that is likely to be a valid claim. But the starting point would be to go and check with your insurer what your product is and whether it's covered.
Thank you for that. So I just want to thank all of our panelists, Professor Grobler, Carol-Lynn Stirrat, Urvashi Ramjee, and Old Mutual for supporting this. We will be sending it out through our email system, and we'll be sending you a recording. Thank you all for the questions. We'll be setting up another in the session for how to create great places to work with Old Mutual. And have a lovely week. Thank you.
Thanks, Ralph. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Ralph. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.